Secret Desires. How Passion Freed Our Marriage. David and Emily were in the back seat. I was sitting in the front passenger seat, staring out the window, but my thoughts were far away. The tension in the car grew heavier, like an electric charge in the air. I knew what was happening behind me, even without turning around. The passion that had burned in Emily's eyes all evening had finally been unleashed. But what surprised me most was my own feelings. Instead of jealousy or anger, all I felt was anticipation, an eagerness for what was to come. When I finally turned my head, I saw her, Emily, the woman I had spent so many years with, lowering her head to David's lap. The sight of it hit me like lightning, but not with anger. Instead, a wild, untamed passion stirred within me, something I hadn't felt in years. I heard the faint sounds of her lips, her breathing growing more labored. Every movement was like fuel to the fire, igniting something inside me that I had been trying to suppress. I quickly turned away, my heart pounding, as if I had witnessed something forbidden, something I wasn't supposed to see. But I couldn't resist. I wanted to look again, to see it all unfold. I glanced back once more, this time for longer. Emily's face was focused, her body alive with desire, and as I watched her, watched them, I felt something break inside me. I thought I would be shocked, but instead, I felt a strange sense of pleasure. I was drawn to this moment, captivated by the sight of my wife giving herself to another man. The closer we got to our destination, the more the tension inside me grew. It wasn't just desire, though that was certainly part of it. It was something deeper. The thought that I was a part of this, that I could watch, could allow it to happen, filled me with a sense of power I hadn't felt in a long time. My breaths were shallow, my skin burned. I could barely sit still, gripping the edge of the seat, waiting for my moment, when the three of us would finally be alone. A wild passion raged inside me, as if released from all constraints. Each time I looked at them, the fire inside me grew stronger, burning away all doubts and hesitation. All that was left was raw desire. The desire to see them, to join them, to lose myself in this new world we had created together. As her lips continued their dance and David's body responded to her, I realized that watching was no longer enough. I wanted to be there, with them, to share in the pleasure unfolding before my eyes. Every second felt like an eternity as I sat there, barely able to contain myself. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest, the blood pulsing in my temples. We were just minutes away now, and I couldn't wait any longer. I needed it. The thought of what would come next, of the three of us together, fueled the fire inside me until it was the only thing I could think about. My body ached for release, for the moment when I would no longer be an observer but become part of this, when I would step into their world. Now, I'll start the story from the very beginning and explain how it all happened. John and Emily had always been the embodiment of the American dream. A happy, stable couple who had built their life together from the ground up. Both in their early 50s, they had been together since they were barely adults, getting married when they were only 20. Over the years, they had faced the typical challenges of raising children, managing careers, and building a home. Their love had weathered the storms of life, from sleepless nights with newborns to the stresses of maintaining a career while balancing family obligations. Together, they had seen their children grow, move out, and begin families of their own. The house that once echoed with laughter, arguments, and the endless noise of everyday life had grown quiet. Too quiet, perhaps. The silence between them wasn't cold, but it was heavy. It was the kind of silence that comes with time, where words seem less necessary because you've already said them all. John and Emily had always loved each other, but the intensity of that love had gradually dulled. Passion had given way to comfort, routine, and familiarity. The days of spontaneous romance, late-night conversations, and shared dreams had become distant memories. Now, they lived in a rhythm that felt more like coasting than living. Their love, though still present, had settled into something safe, predictable, and perhaps too comfortable. John felt it more keenly with each passing day. There were moments, fleeting but powerful, where he caught himself wondering, is this it? He loved Emily, of course he did. But there was a part of him that missed the way things had been when they were younger. when every touch sparked something electric, when every glance was filled with unspoken words. The passion that had once defined their relationship had long since faded, replaced by the steady hum of everyday life. Their intimacy had become rare, reserved for occasional moments that felt more like obligations than acts of love. The kisses were routine, the embraces brief, and the conversations were about everything but each other. John had begun to feel something inside him stir, a quiet restlessness that he didn't fully understand. He didn't know what he wanted exactly, but he knew that the comfort of their routine wasn't enough anymore. He missed the fire, the unpredictability, the feeling of being consumed by love and desire. Now, every touch felt rehearsed, every kiss familiar but empty. He longed for more, even if he couldn't quite put that longing into words. The life they had built was stable, secure, and filled with the accomplishments of raising a family and growing old together. But somewhere along the way, John had lost sight of who they were as a couple, as individuals. The love was still there, but the excitement, the raw emotion that had once filled every corner of their life, had slipped through their fingers like sand. As much as he tried to ignore it, John couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, that there was a part of him, of them, that had been left behind in the busyness of life. John spent a long time gathering the courage to talk to his wife. The idea of having such a direct and vulnerable conversation weighed heavily on him for weeks. He didn't want to hurt Emily, and he wasn't sure how she would react to the suggestion that something was missing between them. Yet, deep down, he knew that if he didn't talk about it, the distance between them would only grow. So he waited for the right moment, hoping that the conversation would somehow flow naturally. One evening, after the kids had left following a family dinner, and the house was quiet, John saw his chance. He poured 2 glasses of wine and joined Emily on the couch, his mind racing with thoughts of how to begin. They sat together in a comfortable silence for a while, sipping their wine, but John could feel the tension building in his chest. He knew he had to say something before the moment passed. Taking a deep breath, he finally spoke. "Emily," he began, his voice steady but soft, "I've been thinking a lot lately about us, about our marriage." Emily looked at him, her brow furrowing slightly, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "What do you mean?" she asked, setting her glass down on the coffee table, giving him her full attention. John hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words. "I love you. You know that," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "But I feel like something's changed between us. Like we've fallen into this routine, and I miss how things used to be. I miss the passion we had." Emily didn't say anything at first. She just watched him, her expression unreadable. John felt his heart race. It was harder than he had imagined. "Opening up like this? I don't want us to lose each other," he continued. "I've been talking to some friends, and they suggested that maybe we could try something new. Something that could bring back the excitement." He paused, feeling nervous about what he was about to say next. "I just want us to be honest with each other, to not hide anything. I think we need to start talking about our desires, our needs, even the ones we don't always talk about." Emily was silent for a long moment, processing his words. John's chest tightened, worried that he had gone too far, that he had opened up a conversation that could lead to places neither of them were prepared to go. But then Emily sighed softly, picking up her glass of wine again and taking a slow sip before speaking. "I've felt it too," she admitted, her voice quiet. "I've been feeling like something's missing, but I didn't know how to bring it up. I didn't want to hurt you, John." Her honesty surprised him, and for the first time in a while, John felt a sense of relief wash over him. They were on the same page, after all. "So," Emily continued, meeting his eyes again, "what exactly are you suggesting?" John took another deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "I'm saying that maybe we should be more open with each other. About everything. Our desires, our fantasies, things we've been afraid to talk about." He hesitated for a moment, then added, "We don't have to hide anything from each other anymore. Whatever we want, we should feel safe enough to talk about it." Emily looked thoughtful, her eyes softening as she considered his words. "It's going to be hard," she said quietly, "but if we're honest with each other, maybe it could help us find that spark again." She gave him a small smile, and for the first time that night, John felt a flicker of hope. They had taken the first step, and though the conversation had been difficult, it was the most honest and open they had been with each other in years. Okay, Emily said after a pause. Let's promise to always be truthful. No more secrets, no more hiding what we really want. We talk, and we listen to each other. John nodded, reaching out to take her hand. No more secrets, he agreed. For the first time in a long time, he felt like they were on the same path, ready to explore whatever came next, together. John felt a mixture of emotions as the conversation unfolded. On the one hand, he was relieved that Emily hadn't reacted negatively to his confession, that she, too, felt the same void between them. But on the other hand, there was something stirring deep inside him, something he couldn't quite name. He wasn't sure what he wanted, or even how far he was willing to go to bring back the passion they had lost. But one thing was clear. Whatever came next, it had to be different. The very thought of stepping out of their comfortable, predictable life both terrified and intrigued him. As they sat in silence for a few moments, John's mind raced. The idea of complete openness between them was daunting. He had never thought about sharing his deepest desires, his fantasies, with Emily. Not in this way. But now, faced with the possibility of true honesty, he realized that part of him craved it. He wasn't entirely sure what that meant, but he felt drawn to it, as if some unspoken part of himself had been waiting for this moment all along. Emily broke the silence, her voice soft but steady. There's something I've been thinking about, she admitted, her fingers fidgeting slightly with the stem of her wine glass. Something I've never told you because I didn't know how you'd react. John's heart raced, and his palms felt slightly clammy as he watched her closely, sensing the weight of what she was about to say. What is it? He asked, his voice calm, though inside, his mind was spinning. Emily took a deep breath before continuing, her gaze dropping to her lap for a moment before meeting his eyes again. I've thought about us being with someone else, she said, her words careful, deliberate. Together. I mean, with another partner. It's just something that's crossed my mind, but I didn't know if you'd ever be open to something like that. For a split second, John didn't know how to react. His mind froze, trying to process what she had just said. A part of him wanted to be shocked, wanted to feel some kind of resistance to the idea, but instead, he felt something else, an odd sense of excitement. It wasn't a thought he had ever entertained seriously before, but as soon as Emily said the words, it was as if a door had been opened inside him. The very idea of it, the possibility, sent a thrill through him, one he hadn't expected. His emotions swirled. He wasn't entirely sure what he wanted, but hearing Emily express a desire for something so daring, so different, stirred something inside him that had long been dormant. You've thought about that? He asked quietly, his voice more curious than surprised. Emily nodded, her expression tentative, as if waiting for him to judge her. Yes, she admitted. I didn't want to hide it anymore. I want to be honest with you, like we promised. John took a moment to collect his thoughts. He could feel his heart beating faster, a mix of uncertainty and intrigue coursing through him. This wasn't what he had expected when he started the conversation, but now that the idea was out in the open, he couldn't ignore the pull it had on him. I don't know if I ever thought about it like that, he said honestly, but maybe it's something we could explore together. As the words left his mouth, John realized just how much he wanted this. Wanted to break free from the old routines, to feel something new, something real again. The uncertainty was still there, of course, but mixed with it was an undeniable sense of anticipation. What Emily had proposed felt like a door opening to a world they had never considered before, and though it was daunting, John couldn't shake the feeling that it might be exactly what they needed. For the first time in a long time, John felt a surge of emotion that was both terrifying and exhilarating. He didn't know what would come next, but in that moment, he knew that he was ready to find out. John and David spent the next week exchanging messages, carefully discussing every detail. Their conversations were thoughtful, deliberate, and at times, surprisingly candid. John found himself drawn to David's approach. He wasn't just a willing participant. He was intelligent and insightful, taking time to consider how this arrangement would work for all of them. David's curiosity matched John's, and it became clear that, for him, This wasn't just an adventure, but an opportunity to explore something new and meaningful. David's calm, mature demeanor put John at ease. He was direct, but respectful, understanding the delicacy of the situation. "I've never done anything quite like this before," David admitted in one of their messages, "but I'm intrigued. It feels like an experience we can all learn from." His words resonated with John, who had been searching for exactly that. A way to bring something fresh and meaningful into their lives. Something that would challenge their old patterns but in a thoughtful, controlled way. As the days went by, John grew more confident about the decision. The more they talked, the clearer it became that David was the right choice. He wasn't impulsive or reckless. He understood the complexity of what they were about to step into. This wasn't just about physical intimacy. It was about trust, openness, and exploring something that could potentially deepen the connection between John and Emily. The excitement, once tinged with uncertainty, began to settle into anticipation as the three of them prepared to take the next step. David and Emily sat in the back seat, their quiet whispers and occasional laughter barely audible over the soft hum of the taxi engine. I sat in the front, staring out the window at the city lights as they slowly blurred past, but I wasn't seeing them. My mind was too occupied with everything that was happening behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know that something was unfolding between them. Something intimate, charged with a passion I hadn't seen in Emily in years. It was as if I could feel it in the air, the subtle shifts in her breathing, the soft movements of her body as she leaned closer to David. I tried to keep my focus on the road ahead, but it was impossible. The tension inside the car was thick, almost suffocating, and yet I was drawn to it, consumed by the pull of what was happening just a few feet behind me. Each second seemed to stretch out longer than the last, and with every passing moment, the anticipation in my chest grew. My fingers tapped restlessly against my leg, my pulse quickening as I imagined what I couldn't see. For a brief moment, I thought about turning around, about watching them. The thought sent a rush of heat through me, not of anger, but of curiosity. An almost overwhelming desire to witness what was happening, to see Emily's face, to see how she responded to David's touch. I had already convinced myself that I wasn't the jealous type, that this was what we both wanted. But now, in the stillness of the car, it was something else. I didn't just want to observe. I wanted to be part of it, to immerse myself in the intensity that seemed to flow between them. As I sat there, my breath becoming more shallow, I couldn't help but reflect on how strange this all was, how far we had come from where we started. I had spent so much time in the past few years feeling disconnected from Emily, feeling like the passion we once had was a distant memory. But now, sitting in this car, knowing what was happening behind me, I felt more alive than I had in years. It was as if a fire had been rekindled inside me, burning brighter with every moment I allowed myself to be drawn into the reality of this new world we were stepping into. The car felt smaller with every passing second, the space between us tightening, becoming almost unbearable. My mind was racing, torn between the tension of wanting to look and the restraint of keeping my eyes forward. Every time Emily shifted in her seat, my pulse would spike, as if her movements were directly connected to my heartbeat. I could feel the weight of what we were about to do pressing down on me, but instead of fear or doubt, there was only excitement. A raw, electric charge that coursed through me, making every nerve in my body hum with anticipation. I could hear her now, her voice soft and playful as she whispered something to David. There was a lightness in her tone, a kind of freedom I hadn't heard from her in years. It wasn't forced, wasn't weighed down by the routines of our daily lives. It was pure, unfiltered joy, and knowing that she felt this way only heightened my own anticipation. I glanced at the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of her face. Her lips slightly parted, her eyes half closed, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just doing this for her. I was doing it for myself too. This was a part of me, a desire I hadn't fully understood until now. The tension in my chest was building, rising with every breath, and as we neared the hotel, I felt the weight of the moment settle over me. This wasn't just an idea anymore, wasn't just something we had talked about. It was real, and we were minutes away from stepping into it. I could feel the taxi slowing down, the bright lights of the hotel coming into view as we pulled into the parking lot. My heart was racing now, pounding in my chest as the car came to a stop. I glanced over at the entrance, the neon sign flickering in the distance, and knew that once we stepped out of the car, there was no turning back. As I opened the door and stepped onto the pavement, the cool night air hit my face, doing little to calm the storm of emotions raging inside me. I turned and watched as Emily and David got out of the car. Emily's face was lit up with a smile, her eyes sparkling with a passion that I hadn't seen in so long. She looked alive, vibrant, as if something had awakened in her, something that had been dormant for years. Her eyes met mine for a brief moment, and I saw the same fire in her gaze that I felt burning inside of me. It was more than just excitement. It was a hunger, a desire that we were both ready to explore. David stood beside her, calm and collected, his presence grounding the moment in a way that felt reassuring. He looked at me, gave a small nod, as if silently acknowledging the significance of what we were about to do. And as we walked toward the entrance of the hotel, the three of us together, I felt the anticipation grow even stronger, the tension in my chest tightening with every step. This was it, the night that would change everything. The night we would finally cross the threshold into something new. That night in the hotel was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The moment we stepped into the room, the air seemed to shift, charged with anticipation, excitement, and a sense of the unknown. The walls of the small, dimly lit room seemed to close in around us, not in a suffocating way, but in a way that heightened every sense, every touch, every glance. There was a weight to the moment, but it wasn't heavy with fear or anxiety. It was heavy with the thrill of crossing into something entirely new, something we had all been waiting for. Emily looked radiant. The way her eyes sparkled in the low light, the soft curve of her lips as she smiled, made her seem more alive than I had seen her in years. There was a freedom in her movements, a joy that spilled out of her with every step she took toward the bed. I could see the way she looked at David, and for the first time, I didn't feel any jealousy. In fact, I felt exhilarated. Watching her, watching them together, stirred something deep inside me that I hadn't expected. It was as if all the tension, all the anticipation that had built up over the past few weeks was finally being released, and instead of feeling threatened or insecure, I felt empowered. David, too, seemed at ease. His calm, composed demeanor had a grounding effect on both of us, making the experience feel even more natural, more fluid. He wasn't rushing anything. Every movement he made was deliberate, thoughtful, as if he understood the weight of the moment and was savoring every second of it. His hands were gentle but firm as they touched Emily, and each time she responded, I could feel my own pulse quicken, my body reacting in ways I hadn't anticipated. I had thought this moment might feel awkward, forced even, but it wasn't. It felt right. It felt exhilarating. Emily's laughter filled the room at one point, light and carefree, breaking the silence and making the air between us feel even more electric. I watched as David's hands moved across her skin, his touch sending shivers down her spine, and I could see her whole body come alive beneath him. Her eyes fluttered closed, and I knew she was lost in the moment, in the pleasure of it all. But what surprised me most was how much I was enjoying it too. Watching her, being a part of it, feeling the energy that seemed to pulse between the three of us. I found myself stepping closer, my own breathing shallow, my body drawn into the intensity of what was happening. When my hands finally reached out, touching Emily's skin as well, it was as if the last barrier between us had dissolved. We were no longer three separate people. We were one, connected by something more than just physical desire. There was a deeper connection, a shared experience that went beyond anything I had imagined. It was intimate in a way I hadn't thought possible, not just between Emily and me, but between all three of us. As the night unfolded, time seemed to lose its meaning. Every moment felt stretched, elongated, as if the hours passed in slow motion, each touch, each breath, each moan magnified in the stillness of the room. My senses were heightened. Every sound, every movement resonated deep within me. I could hear the soft gasps escaping from Emily's lips, feel the heat of David's body as we moved together, see the pleasure written across Emily's face as she gave herself fully to the moment. And the strangest thing was, instead of feeling like an outsider, I felt more connected to her than ever before. The pleasure wasn't just physical. It was emotional, almost spiritual. There was something liberating about letting go of everything we had known before, stepping into a space where there were no rules, no expectations, just raw, unfiltered connection. I felt my body respond to both of them, the tension in my muscles releasing with each passing moment, my mind quieting as I gave in to the experience. The doubts, the fears, the questions, they all melted away, leaving only the pure sensation of being fully present in the moment. At one point, I looked into Emily's eyes, and the way she looked back at me made my heart race. There was love there, but also something else, something deeper, more primal. It was as if we had crossed a boundary together, stepped into a new phase of our relationship where everything was open, everything was possible. She wasn't just my wife anymore. She was my partner in this new journey, and I realized that this was what we had been missing for so long. The passion, the fire, the excitement. It was all here, waiting for us to claim it. David, too, was completely in sync with us. He moved with a grace and confidence that put both of us at ease, and his presence felt like the missing piece to a puzzle we hadn't known we were trying to solve. He wasn't just a third person. He was part of the experience, part of the connection that we had formed together. And as the night went on, it became clear that this wasn't just a fleeting moment of excitement. It was something deeper, something that had changed all of us. When it was all over, the room fell into a peaceful silence, the air thick with the afterglow of what had just happened. I lay there, my body still humming with the remnants of pleasure, my mind calm for the first time in what felt like forever. Emily lay beside me, her head resting on my chest, and for the first time in years, I felt truly connected to her. Not just as her husband, but as her partner, her equal. David sat at the edge of the bed, his breathing slowing as he looked at both of us, a satisfied smile on his face. Emily's eyes met mine, and in that moment, I knew we had found what we had been searching for. Her smile was soft, but her eyes were still alight with the passion and desire that had carried us through the night. She looked alive, fully alive, in a way I hadn't seen in years, and as I looked at her, I realized that I felt the same way. We had stepped into something new, something that had reignited the fire we thought we had lost. It wasn't just about the physical pleasure. It was about the connection, the freedom, the understanding that we were both capable of so much more than we had ever realized. That night, everything changed. It wasn't just a night of passion. It was a night of discovery, of rediscovery, of finding out that we were still capable of love, of desire, of excitement. And as we lay there together, the three of us, I knew that this was just the beginning. After that night, everything changed. Their family life seemed to come alive, filled with new colors and emotions they hadn't felt in years. John and Emily no longer felt the oppressive weight of routine, the feeling that something was missing. Instead, their lives were now filled with passion, honesty, and a deep understanding of each other. They both knew what they wanted and weren't afraid to talk about it openly. Every morning started with new sensations. Every conversation was steeped in honesty and emotional connection. They no longer pretended to be content spouses while suppressing their true desires. Instead, they had opened up to each other fully, without fear of judgment or rejection. What began as an experiment to bring passion back into their lives had become a powerful source of freedom and closeness. John felt his love for Emily transform into something more mature, more profound. He loved her not just as his wife, but as his partner in this new journey. Now they shared not only love, but their fantasies, their desires. Their bond grew stronger than ever. Emily, in turn, embraced the new experience with the same freedom and passion. She felt more confident, more liberated in her desires. Their relationship now had a sense of novelty, as if they were discovering each other all over again with each new encounter. While that experience with David had brought them closer, it was only the beginning of their new path. They were now ready for more, for new experiences that would enrich their lives. They had learned to speak to each other without fear or shame, understanding that in their marriage, there were no longer boundaries, No hidden desires or forbidden topics. Each new meeting, each new conversation now opened up endless possibilities. Their passion had been reborn and had grown into something greater, something that gave them a sense of freedom and incredible closeness. Instead of fearing that they might lose each other, they realized that through this experience, they had found each other again. And now, every night, every day, everything had become bright and full of life. They no longer felt the emptiness. Now their lives were filled with passion, freedom, and a boundless love that knew no limits.